Oh, nice. This was so cool. That's that's an awesome clip. The League of Legends animations are always spectacular to watch. Great motion. Look at that. Look at that beautiful line of action right there. That's straight in the leg. Still dragging up here. So the line of action is kind of this extreme bend here. And they're using the other leg to help accentuate that by dragging it up first. It adds more kind of more impact to the landing right here versus if they had let the leg lead and done this. So this would still kind of push that line of action, but suddenly that leg starting to come down makes it so that you don't have contrast. I know this is not what you want me to take a look at, but I just saw it. It's like, oh, it's so cool. So by having that leg stay up, it creates this contrast, which not only creates the feeling of drag, but then makes this moment here when the leg suddenly kind of pops down and hits that much more powerful. And then you get this beautiful smear frame here. So let's take a look at this. Nice. That's really cool. You did a good job with this. So the main thing I would say with this, let me compare. Okay. So this is going to be the tricky thing, is that in your shot, you're missing a camera move. Now, when you're, how to put this? When you're analyzing animation, camera moves are very tricky to deal with because they will make something feel like an arc is there or not. So what I'm talking about here is if we study the beginning and specifically watch the hips, and I like that suggestion, Lucas. I should set it up so it tweets when I highlight something, because when I highlight it, I usually cut it down to be just like a segment. So maybe that would be useful for people so they don't have to watch the whole stream all the time. Okay. And then it's starting to come down here. Okay. So as we look at this, and let's look at the spacing. I think I misdrew this one. No, this is the one I misdrew. So if we look at the spacing here, and if I draw in the correct spot, it's a little bit more there. You can see that the hips are moving in a downwards arc as they're coming through here. Even at the beginning, from here, they're quite a bit higher. So the hips are coming down. Now on top of that, as this is happening, watch the level of the ground. The ground tilts ever so slightly. I'm exaggerating this here, but yeah, somewhere around there. So the ground is tilting as that happens. What this means is that the arc of the jump is actually going to be affected by that camera move as well. And in this case, if it's moving upwards, that's going to make the arc of the jump less intense. So it's actually going to flatten it out a little bit. So if we look at this, one, there's no camera move. Is that a bad thing? Not really. It's just something to pay attention to. So if the arc of the jump is less intense because of that camera move, without a camera move, we would want that arc to be just a little bit bigger. Just a little bit. Okay. Now if we look at the hips here, you've got a little bit of the arc, but right here, so I'm kind of specifically looking at this point right there, that flat section there. You can see how it starts to flatten out a little bit. So if we look at this, your arc starts to come in, but then starts to turn this way. and the character starts to go horizontally before coming down again. This is making it lose a lot of the momentum that the original has. In the original, we get this, and the hips continually keep coming down. There's no point where they flatten out and plateau. Now, to be fair, you could argue that it is, in the sense that they are animating this on, they're not animating this on ones. So for example, we hit this pose here on frame 14, and it holds for 14, 15, 16, 17, and then 18. So it's holding for 4 frames right there. Even though it's holding, it doesn't mean that it's not moving. So what I mean by this is, if I was to break this down, so we've got a key on 14, and then I needed to put a key on 16 here, I would still want that hip to keep moving down. So it would still have to move along that axis. So with that, it's just watching that arc. Okay, so that's going to add a lot of weight in that beginning moment right there. Okay, the next part here, as he comes through, push that drag on the leg. So again, this might be a result of the animated on 2s, but if you watch this leg, it's really high up here. You've got this really extreme bend in the leg, and then the other leg there. And as it comes down, specifically watch the relationship between the knee and the ankle. I'm going to kind of bring this down here. Then we get into that. Okay. So let's take a look at this. So as it's coming down, what color will show up here? Purple? Okay, purple shows up. The spacing between the knee compared to the ankle, you can see that's actually longer here, right there. So that is a wider spacing than this. What that means is that as he's coming down, I'm going to have to twist my arm here. You've got a bend here, and they're both technically moving, but you get the wrist, or I should say the ankle, bends or drags a little bit. The knee is pushing down, and the ankle is wanting to stay up higher. It creates this offset and this feeling of drag, so that when you get to this point, same thing. The spacing of the knee, look at how much longer it is compared to the spacing of the ankle. If we were to kind of extend it here, it's quite a bit longer. Creates that feeling of drag. Now if we look at here, as it's coming down, it's the opposite. You're starting in this pose. Let's pick a color that shows up. Knee, ankle. And then as we go forward, let's look at this. The ankle is moving about the same, if not a little bit more, than the knee. So you're losing that drag at this moment here. And then you kind of get a little bit more right there. It starts to drag a little bit there, but it needs to drag all the way. That's going to get you that nice kind of whipping motion of that leg. Okay. Now here, let me double check the reference here. Start there, and back, forward. Okay, this is always a tricky moment. The thing that I'm looking at is the arc of the hips. Right through here. Okay. That's actually a little higher. So it goes forward, back, forward. So there's a little bit of a loop right there. Now this creates an anticipation for the big jump. And in yours, you do have that. But the problem is that because you're adding, again, this is the going from 2s and 3s and even 4s to 1s, is you have to fill in that kind of gap yourself. And what's happening because of that fill in the gap is that the angle of the jump is losing itself. So what do I mean by losing itself? If we watch here, it comes down around, just like what we were seeing in the reference, but then instead of going up in the reference, it goes this way. Here it's actually going forward, and then it goes up, and then it goes down, and then it goes up. So it's kind of launching himself forward and then bouncing across, which is losing some of that momentum. If he's anticipating down this way, you want to push that out the other way to make that as powerful as you can. And this is what we're seeing here, is as he anticipates back, up, and then it keeps that momentum up until he finishes the flip and comes down. So really watch that momentum of the hips there. Okay, so here you're dealing with a big change here. So you've got 36, and that holds for 37, 38, 39, so 3 frames. In that section, so like right here, basically, it's from this pose until the next one, you're going to have to really push the offset. Oh, take care, Josh. So what I mean by pushing the offset is, if we look at the reference here, we've got this really great offset between the hips, chest, and arms. So if we kind of simplify these shapes here, the arms and elbows are kind of up above the head. We've got this little bend here, slight line of action there. And then as he flips, his chest doesn't really move, but look at how far the hands are moving. So the arms are leading here. They're coming up while the chest is dragging. So it's actually, it looks like it's arms are number 1. They're the things that move the most. Number 2 is the hips. Number 3 is the chest. Then as we come through here onto this pose, we can see that the hips definitely move a lot. And the chest finishes its rotation, or I should say it's starting to rotate. And the hands, we're getting 2 different things. This hand barely changes pose right here. The hand itself, if we kind of look at this position right there, doesn't really change. Whereas the other one comes out way over here and it's all straight. Okay. We can see that the hips kind of took over and then the body is catching up. So the hips are still leading here. But as we break that down, we want to make sure that we don't hit a point where what's happening here, the hips are coming down, the chest is coming up, and the hand is going out all at the same time. Right there. Even this hand, you can see how it goes up quite high right there in comparison to the reference here, where it doesn't visually change position that much. This allows us as the audience to focus on this side, which is the way he's going. If this hand is changing too much, it brings us over here, which makes us have, we're looking back where he came from instead. So you want to offset that. So if his chest is here, for example, arm there, let's say arm here, on the next pose, we want to break that down. So the hips might be leading. Keep the chest kind of bent back a little bit, so it's still dragging. Maybe that's a little too much. So we get a little bit more kind of bend in the spine. This arm would start to rotate, but we try to keep the motion as minimal as possible. And then the other arm might already be, I'll do this in a different color. Black's not going to show up, is it? Might already be kind of leading to where it's going to be at the end here. So now the arm and hip are the thing that are leading. And at the end here, we get that little bit of motion in that arm. The other arm kind of stays where it is. And the body finishes the flip as the hips kind of come down. So you're picking what is leading and what is following. So exaggerating that. And let's see, one last thing here. I'm not sure if the music is actually, I just realized the music is really low. Might just be the song. I think here you're losing mass somehow. So what I mean by losing mass is he's jumping in this direction. He's got this really extreme bend here. And then suddenly his body looks a lot shorter and he's totally rotated in a different direction. And looking at the reference here, there is this big jump, but if we look at the body, it's not changing direction mid motion. He's got this forward lean to the body here. As he jumps, he goes up into this angle and then finishes that motion. So he's actually just straightening out. So he's doing that arc right there with his upper chest, his neck and head. And it kind of continues there. You can see how if we were to track the neck, for example, what color is going to show purple? The neck keeps traveling in an arc right through there. Now if we look at this, as this is happening, the neck goes there, and then it goes forward. So it's going forward, and then over, and then up, and then down again. So you're losing that weight in the character. And Lewis, thank you so much for the subscription. Aw, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. So in this case, really watch that body. It's not just him kind of jumping and starting to spin randomly. He's throwing his weight of the chest over and kind of screen right that way. And it should move in a nice clean arc. That'll get you that weight and then that kind of impact later on. So part of that is going to be pushing this so that that line of action as he's jumping is more this way, not quite so angled. Yeah. So those would be my main notes. a lot of this you can kind of keep pushing and just like start looking at the arms, like tracking the arms, the elbows, all of that stuff. But hopefully that kind of makes sense of what I'm looking for when I'm comparing these. It's really just kind of making sure that we keep that fundamental motion even when we're adding the in-betweens that the shot didn't have normally. Now, with all of this said, I do want to say this is an amazing master study. You're doing a great job on this. It feels really good. It's just kind of more of the polishy stuff. So yeah, hopefully that helps.